Okay, hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Arcaro.
I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, meeting minutes for June 13, 2022 are approved. We also have a special meeting of June 21st, 2022. Are there any alterations or corrections? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll second it.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Abstain.
Okay, meeting minutes for June 21st, 2022 are approved. We have a special presentation this evening. And with us in chambers tonight is dispatcher Ashley Sinoski and Officer Tim Rose. If you come forward, please. Anywhere over there by the X.
Yes.
If you could just introduce her.
I'd like to introduce you to Ashley Zanowski, our dispatcher. Shift work. So I don't say too much, but she does a great job.
That's what I hear. In fact, you're the employee of the month.
Congratulations.
So we have a certificate for you, and Ms. Lacano, if you could read that into the record.
Certificate of Achievement, Employee of the Month. The Employee of the Month for June is dispatcher Ashley Sinoski. Ashley came to the department as a vendor with another business hired by the city. Her work ethic in that capacity played a great deal into the decision-making of hiring her as a full-time dispatcher. While dispatching has evolved dramatically over the years, Ashley was very quick to adapt. Ashley has a knack for assisting officers on complaints by looking up information that may play a role in what incident officers may be in the midst of handling. In her downtime, Ashley is always working on tasks involving other aspects of dispatching responsibilities or cleaning. While Ashley has only been with the department for a relatively short time, her dedication and work ethic speak for itself. Signed this day of June 2022 by councilpersons Mrs. Ledford and Mr. Goff.
Congratulations. So proud of you. Play a vital role down there. So we're very proud of you.
You're doing a good job.
Would you like to say anything? Just saying you're very much. Being a dispatcher and for the award.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ashley.
Thank you. Good job. Congratulations.
Okay, moving on to citizen comments. Does anybody have any citizen comments? Okay, hearing none, communications.
I have a few this evening. First one is a public notice that was published on June 24th, 2022 from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Buffalo District. The purpose of this public notice is to solicit comments from the public regarding the work described below. No decision has been made as to whether or not a permit will be issued at this time. It is an application for a permit under authority of Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899 and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act 33 USC 1344. The applicant being the Conneaut Port Authority of 929 Broad Street, Conneaut, Ohio. The waterway and location is within the Conneaut Harbor off Naylor Drive in the city of Conneaut, Ashtabula County, Ohio. And the proposed work is the construction of a new transient marina for recreational boats within the existing Conneaut Harbor. The information will be posted on the city's website. The second is traffic regulation number 307, no parking north side of Erie Street from Sandusky Street to Day Street. That there shall be no parking on the north side of Erie Street from Sandusky Street to Day Street. And traffic regulation number 308, parking south side of Erie Street that there shall be diagonal parking spaces on the south side of Erie Street, beginning at Broad Street and continuing east for 132 feet. That is all I have this evening.
Okay, thank you. Does council have any communications? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the reports of the administration, beginning with the city manager, Mr. Hockaday.
Thank you, Council President Arcaro. Just a couple quick things, some of them forward-looking here. The Conneaut Creek Dredge Material Facility, as of right now, I tentatively have CT Consultants coming out for the next work session in July to go over all the final phase 2, which are phase 1 and phase 2 construction drawings that need to go out for advertisement to bid for construction of the dredge material facility. So that will be our kind of final review point. We do have consent from Canadian National to proceed with the construction. They've completed their engineering review of the phase 1 and phase 2 now. So this is kind of the last step before we throw it out there for advertisement and award. So I'm tentatively looking at that Tuesday following July 4th. I also wanted to, and I know it was in the newspaper, and I know shared a quick glimpse of it, the static building cleanup grant award. We worked collaboratively with the Ashtabula County Brownfield Coalition, which consists of the County Port Authority, Land Bank, and Growth Partnership of Ashtabula County. And I really want to give some special thanks to the former Land Bank Director, Eddie Eckert. He was instrumental in us getting the updated phase 2 completed. And then also Greg Myers, who was instrumental in submitting our final application to the state for that funding, of which we were successful. So big thanks to Mr. Eckert and Mr. Greg Myers for all their assistance in that. So that's a big deal. This is, as you know, this has been under the city's radar for almost 20 years now. And it is our property, and we're going to be able to do the cleanup on that property and get it to a status of what we call an NFA, which is no further action letter. In other words, it'll be fully remediated upon completion. And then we can look at redevelopment efforts beyond just the cleanup of the brownfield itself. So it's a big deal. It's been a long time coming. So really excited about that. We're doing some project closeout stuff. I want to thank Mr. Williams on some of the OPWC stuff for Route 20 Waterline Phase 2 and also Chestnut Phase 3, which we're completing some of the bill out on those pieces. The Route 20 sewer lining project, that is looking to wrap final construction this week. So hopefully we're done before the weekend. That is the goal for them to be completely out of the way at that point. I had a lengthy discussion on the Route 20 project and with ODOT today. You know, we talk nearly daily with ODOT. Both the ODOT project manager and myself are incredibly concerned by their lack of forward movement in the last 2 weeks. My understanding is that they are going to begin milling on the west side of the full reconstruction starting the Tuesday following July 4th. So they're going to be doing curb ramps through the downtown this week. Once they do that and complete the intermediate course, they'll come back through and do the full grade, final grade wearing course after that, and then manhole adjustments. And they are to be contract complete by the end of July. However, that's a lot of work in a very short period of time. And the weather's been incredibly cooperative in the last couple of weeks. And, you know, I think us here in Northeastern Ohio understand that the weather's not always cooperative for us. So, you know, we're concerned about their overall timeline. I continue to make those concerns heard. However, you know, they do have a contract, and if it isn't done on time, they will sustain liquidated damages. for every day that it's not complete. So just making you aware, it's not something that the city just sits back and, the ODOT contract is going to be whatever ODOT says it is. We call every day. We've gone over a number of punch list items on several of the pieces that have been completed already. The curb ramps just east of Parish Road are going to be readdressed. They're not quite right into detail. So we are going to have those reassessed here and come up with a solution for those. So
Do they have to be redone?
they could be if they can't get it within spec. So, they put these high retaining shoulders on them, even though the curbs are depressed. My concern is plows will clip them, in wintertime. It's just typical standard ODOT detail. So it's not anything special. They should have been able to do it correctly the first time, but they're going to address them. We've spoken to ODOT about that. So, we just continue to follow up on any of the issues in any capacity that we can. They do have the seeding and yard restoration yet to complete. They did put topsoil in there through the full restoration area. They will be doing the hydro seed work here. I'm not sure if it's going to happen this week or next week, but they will do hydro seeding and do lawn restoration for those folks that are in that full depth reconstruction area. Okay. So if people have questions or concerns, you can direct them to me. I will send them to ODOT and have ODOT generate a response as they are the project manager. And we'll go from there. If it's something that we can contest through the contract and it's contestable, we will. But, we just try and keep the project moving forward, even though we don't have direct contractual relationship. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. You have a couple of items on for tonight. We have all the bid awards for demolitions, both residential, that is a lump contract. So that's all going to one contractor. And then each of the commercial contracts were bid separately. So they're awarded separately as well. Happy to answer any questions on those. I'm happy to see those move forward. And then the other one that needs to move forward here, let's see here. We have a couple of appropriations and fund creations. The one that I really want to kind of focus on there is the fund creation for the CDBG Madison Street grant. As you know, we were awarded that. We are a sub-recipient on that. So it doesn't directly come to the city. The county is the direct recipient of the grant. They administer the funds, but we are required to memorialize all those expenditures across our books, which is the reason for it. But John can answer your questions about memorization of funds. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, I have two other things. This Friday night, we have a reminder that we have our parade, the coming up 4th of July parade, and this Saturday night, approximately 9 p.m. are the fireworks, 10 p.m., excuse me. So thank you to the Port Authority for hosting and putting all of the fireworks together this year. I know that's not a small ordeal. So I appreciate their effort in taking over that.
What time's the parade Friday night?
I believe lineup is at 6. Confirm that. It's on our. I think lineup starts at 6.
Well, I thought it was Saturday to leading down to the festival, which led into the fire.
Pretty sure parade's on Friday night.
Told me.
Well, according to what they applied for, it's Friday. So if that's changed, I will let you know. But as of the application that they submitted to council was for Friday, is what we've done in the past, because it's too hard for us to run 2 shifts on Saturday to do parade and other patrols. And the last item was we have some cleanup work to finish downtown. They will be doing that Wednesday. So hopefully we'll be going through that on Wednesday as well as in the public parking area. Okay. So we will have some temporary traffic issues on Wednesday.
I found a posting about the parade from the chamber. It does say that the parade is 2 PM Saturday, July 2nd, Broad Street to Depot.
Okay.
And then the fireworks at 9:45.
Okay, well, then that's what they're
That's-
posting.
That's
Then-
what they're posting.
So we have,
That's not what their permit is.
Yeah,
Saturday at 2 PM. Tim?
correct. Oh, that's what the posting says. I know in the past, it's always been the Friday night
Mhm.
before, so maybe they're just using an old,
They asked for Saturday and we said Friday.
oh,
So, but it doesn't mean that they didn't go ahead and post it their way.
I gotcha. Okay, yeah,
But they
that's,
should be following the permit, correct?
Correct.
uh-huh.
Any other questions or comments for the city manager?
I just, Mr. Carroll, I'd just like to thank Mr. Hockaday for communicating with ODOT on the West or Route 20 overlay. Because I know we're all tired of dodging manholes and going over top of them and things like that. So it's good to hear at some point we're going to be completed. So the damages is part of the contract. Are we able to do anything if they go beyond the stipulated time in the contract?
Well, the state
We
of
could go
Ohio,
to ODOT and say,
well, ODOT would withhold funds. So
okay,
there's a per day penalty. I don't know what that per day penalty is. I mean, but their per day penalty could be $1,000 a day or whatever until it completes. So if they take an extra 30 days, for example, to complete, they would lose, at $1,000 a day, $30,000 in penalty. I would have to look at what that penalty would
would
be.
they do the manhole, what are they, raising the manholes or the very last phase after the drive course or whatever that last
Yeah,
course is?
yes. So they will put the wearing course on last and then they go through and they adjust each individual casting. So that's a lot of castings. I mean, I think it's over 100 castings. So they cut out each one, pour a concrete collar and set a new casting.
Similar like they did on Broad Street.
Yes, exactly the same. It's a
Okay.
proprietary process. If you ever want to look at what they do, you can YouTube something called Mr. Manhole is the proprietary process that they do where they cut it out, elevate it, adjust the casting and put the new barrel
Hmm.
back up.
But they'll be going westbound potentially Tuesday after the holiday.
Yeah.
Okay. Potentially. They'll start to mill
Yes,
going west to the.
going
bridge.
west.
Right, okay.
Yes, and that will be a moving work zone, just as it was on the east side. So there will be people flagging and directing traffic. It will continually move throughout the day.
Any other questions for the city manager? Okay, thank you. Move on to the finance director, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Next, our next meeting will be passing the tax budget. What I gave you today is just the millage portion. It's basically the first page of the tax budget. Probably the more important part of the tax budget is the setting of the millages and estimating the revenue from them. Right now, I'm just using the 203 million in assessed valuation for the city. That's the most current one that we have. At the end of 2022, that could change and probably will change. So these numbers will either increase or decrease depending on that. But as I said, that's the only figure we can use right now for our estimates. We have no required debt service in 2022 for millage purposes. We have 4 outside levies, a fire levy, 2 police levies, and a street levy. And then for inside millage, I'm not recommending any changes to the inside millage. Council can adjust those millages as they see fit up to the 3.63 mils. The city levies up to 10 inside mills. The schools, the county, in the city split that millage, we get 3.63. So we're looking at for all of the outside millage. And I put the full millage in there, even though we're not going to collect on that full millage, just to give you an idea of how much we would collect if we had the full millage versus the effective millage. But for the estimated 100% tax receipts for effective millage for just the levies, we're looking at a little over 2,046,000. And for the inside millage, about 736,000 for a grand total of 2.783 million. Everything has that 5% delinquency factor included in there. It's a more conservative estimate. So we take everything, multiply it by 95% for our collections. So we're looking at about 2.6 million, 2.644 million as far as collections that we anticipate. We usually collect more than that. But as I said, this is a more conservative estimate. And then as I said, the inside millage, there's no reduction factor on inside millage. It collects 100%. The effective millage, if you look at the fire levy, the police levy, and the street levy, it's about a 5% reduction from the full millage. The old police levy is about a 10% reduction from the full millage. So outside millage is 10.75, effective millage is 10.07. So there's about a 3/4 of a mil reduction on those four levies. So total effective millage for the city this year will be 13.70. And it's 14.38 for the full millage. So as I said, this will be included in the tax budget, but I just wanted to go over the tax budget millage portion of it before you see that full budget next week. You have any questions? I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for the finance director? Okay, thank you. Move on to the law director. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Arcaro. I submitted a written report by email. Everyone should have received a copy of that. I won't bore everyone by going through all the details of that report. My reports are pretty repetitive. The names change, but I mean, the function of my office is basically the same from month to month. But if anyone has any questions about anything in the written report, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for the law director? Okay, thank you. Okay, move on to reports of our committees. Does anybody have a committee report? Okay, hearing none, liaison reports.
I have a couple things, Mr. Arcaro, excuse me. One thing I'd like to announce that the Cable Advisory Board will be meeting this Wednesday, the 29th at noon at the Conneaut Public Library.
Also would like to let everyone know there was a Conneaut Convention and Visitor Bureau meeting Tuesday, June 14th. The next meeting will be July 12th at the Conneaut Port Authority office at 6 p.m. Couple points of interest from the meeting is Mr. George Peterson made a presentation to the Visitors Bureau regarding projects that are happening down at the Port Authority. Also, a Spotlight Community Award was given to the Conneaut Public Library, so congratulations to them. They are doing a membership drive right now, so if you would like to be a member, please contact them. There is an online form that can be filled out as well. At the time of this meeting, there was 83 members, but I know from subsequent emails that that number has increased. There are 2 board vacancies. So if you are interested, please contact them to apply. And they were actually just went over different announcements, updates on upcoming events. In case you haven't heard, D-Day weekend is August 18th through the 20th. There'll be a Visitors Bureau Annual General Membership Meeting September 6th at Buccia's at 6. Perch and Pilsner is back this year, September 9th and the 10th. And then the Outdoor Learning Center Discovery Day will be September 10th. That is all, Mr. Arcaro.
Okay, did they happen to mention anything about the Broad Street Arch project?
I think they did with George. I wasn't there for
Okay.
the whole thing, but they
Okay.
did.
All right,
Yes,
Thanks.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else for a committee report? Or liaison, I didn't believe we're in liaisons. Okay. I have a liaison report. I attended the Port Authority meeting. And a couple of the highlights, they indicated they're very happy with the police presence down there. As you know, we are contracting with them they are contracting with the city now with the police department for 3 months for the summer months, and they're very happy with the presence down there. They have a new administrative assistant, Terry Trisket, and she's on board. They have quite a bit going on. They've been making improvements to Dean Avenue Park, installing new playground equipment, and they intend to put in 3 pickleball courts and a new sign indicating that is in fact Dean Avenue Park. There's going to be a monster boat float on July 10th. And they are hoping to be awarded platinum level clean marina in August. And they also introduced a new Modus bird tracking program, which is attached to their website, which is very interesting for the bird people out there who like bird watching. So, and I will submit their report into the record. Okay, if there are no other liaison reports, we'll move on to our ordinances for this evening. And we have 8 ordinances in first reading to consider. And we will begin with ordinance 5222.
An ordinance authorizes the city manager to award the bid and enter into contract with Hughes Excavating for the demolition of the commercial structure located at 970 Harbor Street, not to exceed a total of $16,850, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Hockaday, if you could briefly just,
I'll cover all the demolitions and then you don't have to come back to me. So this is vis-a-vis some ARPA dollars that were granted to all counties in the state of Ohio that have land banks, and Ashtabula County does have a land bank. So they've reached out to all the communities within Ashtabula County for potential commercial and residential demolition projects that were pending. We have 8 residences and 3 commercial structures for just under $200,000 in total value for demolitions. The city signed a contract earlier this year with the land bank, and the council has already done an appropriation for this. So we're at the point of award. I just want to point out that these are all grant dollars that came to the city that made these demolitions possible. A lot of these have been in the hopper for some period of time with court orders. The 3 commercial buildings that we're talking about here specifically, I give a lot of credit to the law office and former law director Kyle Smith for his work on bringing those through the court process, which made them then eligible for this grant. So really happy to see these move forward. That's it.
okay, if you could just advise Hughes Excavating where they're located out of.
They're from Conneaut.
Oh, Conneaut, okay.
Yeah, it's Hugh Ingram.
Oh, okay.
It was 10.
I'm using the first name.
Yeah.
Last, okay. Okay, and then this first one, 970 Harbor Street, is Peterson property. Correct?
It is. And then the 363 Mill is also a Peterson property that's just south of the schools, or southeast of the schools, I should say. And the final one is the 900 Center Road is the former Farnham School building that is partially collapsed. So all of these have been on our radar for a long period of
Very
time.
long time. Okay. Any questions or comments regarding this ordinance?
Mr. Hockaday, there wasn't any, with ARPA dollars, there wasn't any, was maximum bid at a certain threshold, or was it still at 50, just for curiosity? Because of ARPA funds, I couldn't remember if they lowered the threshold for bid, like to 25, or if it was still at 50, like, even though these are all lowest bid.
So we weren't entirely sure what the bids
Okay.
would come in at. And a couple of these very easily approached the threshold of $50,000, which makes it biddable under the Ohio Revised Code. I think we received some incredibly competitive pricing, and we received a number of bids. I believe there were 6 or 7 total bidders, so it was incredibly competitive. They did come in under 50,000 each for the commercial, but we were concerned that they would exceed 50,000 potentially. So we followed a good practice of when in doubt, bid it. And it just creates a fair and open playing field, and you still get the best price. So,
Any other questions? Is there a motion to proceed?
I'll make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 52-22.
Okay, there's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 5222. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
yes.
Ms. Ledford, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
This time I'd like to declare ordinance 52-22 an emergency.
There's a motion to declare ordinance 5222 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
And Mrs. Ledford, the emergency has been declared.
This time I'd like to act on ordinance 52-22.
Is there a motion to act on ordinance 5222? Is there a second?
Second it.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
The ordinance 5222 is passed. Move on to ordinance 5322.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to award the bid and enter into contract with Hughes Excavating for the demolition of the commercial structure located at 363 Mill Street, not to exceed a total of $12,890, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, is there any discussion? There's a motion to proceed.
I'd like to make the motion to suspend the 3 reading rule for ordinance 53-22.
There's a motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on ordinance 5322. Is there a second? A second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Emery, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to make a motion to declare ordinance 5322 an emergency.
There's a motion to declare ordinance 5322 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Emery, emergency has been declared.
I'd like to make the motion to act on ordinance 53-22.
Motion to act on ordinance 5322. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 5322 is passed. Move on to ordinance 5422.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to award the bid and enter into contract with Hughes Excavating for the demolition of the commercial structure located at 900 Center Road, not to exceed a total of $27,890 and declaring an emergency.
Is there any discussion? Is there a motion to proceed?
I'll make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule for ordinance 54-22.
Okay, there's a motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on ordinance 5422. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Prokowski, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to move to declare ordinance 54-22 an emergency.
It's a motion to declare ordinance 5422 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Pardon me, Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Prokowski, the emergency has been declared.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 54-22.
It's a motion to act on ordinance 5422. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, ordinance 5422 has passed. Move on to ordinance 5522.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to award the bid and enter into contract with C&J Contractors for the demolition of residential properties in the city of Conneaut, not to exceed a total of $116,400 and declaring an emergency.
Okay, is there any discussion? Mr. Hockaday, can you advise who C&J Contractors are?
They're new to us. They're out of the city of Cleveland. We did contact all their references. They had exceptional references with the Cuyahoga County Land Bank, performing over 1,000 demolitions with them. And they've also worked for the Cuyahoga County Metro Parks, Lake County Land Bank, and Metro Parks as well on demolitions. So they had exceptional references. We're hoping we have success with them.
Okay. Ms. O'Connell, if you could read section 1 into the record, please.
Yes, the city manager is hereby authorized to award the bid and enter into contract with C&J Contractors for the demolition of the following residential properties at the total bid price of $116,400. 597 Baltic Street, 187 Hyler Street, 799 Buffalo Street, 562 Broad Street, 150 Poplar Street, 372 Mill Street, 250 Jackson Street, 251 Clay Street, 247 Daniels Avenue, 294 Harbor Street, 341 Woodworth Road, and 295 Depot Street.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to proceed?
Mr. Arcaro, I'd like to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 55-22.
There's a motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on ordinance 5522. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
It's also in tax foreclosure.
Okay, Mr. Moiseo, the 3 reading rules are suspended.
I'd like to make a motion to declare ordinance 55-22 an emergency.
There's a motion to declare ordinance 5522 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Moiseo, the emergency's been declared.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 55-22.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 5522. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, ordinance 5522 is passed. I'd like to thank everybody involved in getting these ordinances to fruition. Unfortunately, we have to use taxpayer dollars to take care of people's property who allow it to become dilapidated, unsafe. Okay, moving on to ordinance 5622.
An ordinance to amend section 3.1 of the city manager's contract to increase his salary effective June 15, 2022, and not declaring an emergency.
Okay, as you know, we discussed this in executive session. Is there any further discussion? Okay, is there a motion to proceed?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Lynn.
Okay. sure. I'll make a motion to declare ordinance 5622 an emergency, right? Or suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 56-22 as
Yeah.
amended.
There's a motion to suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 5622 as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, Mrs. Ledford, the three reading rule has been suspended.
This time I'd like to declare ordinance 56-22 an emergency as amended.
Okay, there's a motion to declare ordinance 5622 an emergency as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, Mrs. Ledford, the emergency has been declared.
This time I'd like to act on ordinance 56-22 as amended.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 5622 as amended. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 5622 is passed. Might add, we appreciate your service to the city, and this is in line with the compensation package that all the other employees received in the city as well. So
I just want to say thank you to all of council. It's been 7 years. It's hard to believe that it's been 7 years. That's just mind-boggling to me. But I do appreciate your continued support and enjoy working with all of you.
Oh, we appreciate you.
Yes.
might also add that Mr. Hockaday is the second longest serving city manager since we went to city manager form of government.
I have the bald spot to prove it.
Very good.
Oh, there's plenty of grace there.
Okay, moving on to ordinance 5722.
An ordinance to create Fund 334 Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Grant for the purpose of accounting for the receipts and disbursements related to the Ohio Department of Development Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Program Grant.
Mr. Williams.
This is the Buffalo Street wastewater grant, correct? We're going to appropriate the 198,000 after the fund is created. I believe these are federal dollars, both of these, the next fund as well. So it probably will be subject to the single audit this year when we have our audit for next year. I'm assuming that all of these will be dispersed before the end of the year. But we do have to create a fund in order to account for those separately. And this is the process.
Okay, any questions or comments regarding this ordinance? Motion to proceed?
I'll make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 57-22.
This motion is to suspend a 3 reading rule on ordinance 5722. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, Ms. Ledford, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to act on ordinance 57-22.
This motion to act on ordinance 5722. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 5722 is passed. Move on to ordinance 5822.
An ordinance to create Fund 335 CDBG Madison Street Grant for the purpose of accounting for the receipts and disbursements related to the PY 21 Community Development Block Grant.
Mr. Williams.
This is the second grant. We're going to appropriate 629,000 in our budget amendment for this fund, but we do need to create the fund in order to account for those disbursements and receipts on a separately. So
Okay, any questions or comments regarding this ordinance? Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 58-22.
There's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 5822. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Prokowski, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to move to act on ordinance 58-22.
Motion to act on ordinance 5822. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 5822 is passed. Move on to ordinance 5922.
An ordinance to amend the 2022 budget through appropriations and fund and interfund transfers attached Tier 2 and marked Exhibit A.
Mr. Williams again.
thank you. The first one is the COVID-19 grant. I sent you an email from Michelle, the Health Department Director. This is a grant they've had for several years, and she's just making some adjustments in between the line items. So she's increasing personnel by 8,600 and supplies by 1,362 and decreasing contractual services by the same amount. So the net effect on that grant is 0. I believe this grant has to be spent before the end of July. Some of these funds for personnel, we can use to charge back to the general fund. Or we can charge general fund expenditures to this grant. So that should help the general fund out somewhat. And then the next two are the 2 grants that council just created the funds, 334 for the wastewater grant construction. We're appropriating 198,000 for that. And then the CDBG Madison Street grant, we're appropriating 629,000 for that. So the grand total of this budget amendment is 827,000. I did certify this revenue with the county. So we are able to appropriate it. And then once we do appropriate that, if there are any adjustments that are needed, because on the CDBG one, it was kind of difficult to come up with the exact amount that we needed to appropriate. I believe it's 629,000. If we need to increase it, we can always recertify and reappropriate. But I believe the 629 figure, because I know in Mr. Hockaday's report, it said about 750,000. I wasn't sure if that included.
It is 750,000, but the demolition portion is happening on the Conneaut Municipal Library's property, and it's not part of the public asset that we're
Okay.
going to have a hand in designing or managing, and it would not be our capital asset in the
Okay.
end.
So the 629 figure should be good. So,
If that understanding changes at any point, we can adjust it.
Yeah, we
But
can
since
always-
it's not on our property and it's not our asset to depreciate,
okay.
and it's going to the library as a co-applicant. So that's why it's not reflected across our fund.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this ordinance? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to waive or suspend, excuse me, the 3 reading rule on 5922.
Motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on ordinance 5922. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo, the three reading rule has been suspended.
Like to make a motion to act on ordinance 59-22.
Motion to act on ordinance 5922. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 5922 is passed. Okay, moving on to unfinished and old business. Hearing none, miscellaneous business.
Mr. Carroll, I have one. On Saturday, my wife and I attended the Pollinator Symposium at the Outdoor Learning Center. There were approximately 100 attendees at the morning seminar and more at the afternoon activities. Many people came from out of town. There were quite a few questions about how far we were from the lake. And the County Tourism Visitor Bureau had a tent and were giving out county information. I really enjoyed it. I hope we get it back next year. It changed my idea on chemicals and how to use them, and it was pretty entertaining.
Very good. Anybody else for miscellaneous business?
I'm just gonna issue a reminder. And again, it's a little early, but I'll issue another one at the work session on the 5th. Public Works meeting, July 21st at 6 PM here in council chambers. That'll be a Thursday,
The 26th, you said?
21st, July 21st at 6 here in council chambers. I want to get it out there now since I won't be in attendance for the July 9th regular council meeting.
Anybody else for miscellaneous business? We have a few things. First of all, just a reminder that our work session will be on the 5th, which is Tuesday, not the 4th, unless you guys want to celebrate the 4th here. And we'll convene at the water plant, as was suggested. Yep. So that'll be 5:30 at the water plant. And we can tour the facility and have our work session there. Second, I will make my annual request and plea. I don't know why I have to do this every year, but the weeds around the city, guardrails, bridges, and downtown, if we could spray.
They're going to be downtown on Wednesday, finishing that section. And I've talked to him about the weeds. The cemetery sexton who holds the spray license has been on vacation for the last couple of weeks. He has done some limited spraying, like in the juncture out back, like in the enclosure. So it's already been requested. So
Okay. Thank you. And then finally, need a motion to excuse Mr. Kozeski.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Kozeski's been excused. And I'd like to wish everybody a safe and happy 4th of July. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, Mr. Arcaro.
I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yeah.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, City Council for June